Okay, hi everyone. Today we're going to be looking at some of the 9/11 dancing Israelis declassified FBI files. There are over 900 files, and I've picked out what I think is most relevant to the case. We're going to go into Israeli intelligence, the dancing Israelis I also mentioned. We'll talk about the hijackers and all the information that the FBI uncovered and what their conclusions were. The best stuff's at the end of the video, so stick around, but it's pretty crazy the whole way through, so hope you're strapped in, sitting down, got a blanket, cup of hot tea, whatever you need to get through this. So let's get started. So we'll start with the initial traffic stop. So for those of you who don't know, the dancing Israelis were found to be celebrating while the Twin Towers were collapsing. They were filming it, they were giving each other high fives, and they were so suspicious that the police received numerous calls from, just citizens who saw them, and everyone thought it was a bit strange. They were pulled over and they were found, first of all, to have explosive traces in the van. A bomb-sniffing dog alerted police to this, and swabs were taken and sent to the lab. They were also found with a camera, several personal notebooks full of telephone numbers, backpacks, airline tickets with immediate departure dates for destinations worldwide, Israeli passports, in some cases expired, a German passport, and around $5,000 in cash stuffed into a sock. So all in all, pretty strange. Not off to a good start. Also, no moving equipment was found in the vans, things that you would typically find. No work gloves, blankets, straps, ropes, boxes, dollies, or rollers were found. Neither was a video camera that they were alleged to have had, but they did have a still photo camera. When they were interviewed, all the suspects gave different reports about where they were when the attacks happened. So police thought this was a bit strange as well. Film developed from the camera that was seized showed that they were located at 100 Manhattan Avenue in Union City, New Jersey, called the Doric Tower Apartments. Now, keep that address in mind for later because it will come up again. And this apartment was in clear view of the Twin Towers, and they were there taking photos and, break dancing, getting down, getting boogie while 3,000 people perished. So, pretty strange. One of the guys was seen the night before in the towers by one of the residents with a Spanish-speaking individual, unidentified. Strangely, he said to the Spanish guy that he was a construction worker and he'd be working in the building until 7 p.m. that night, which is not true. He worked for a moving company, so don't know what that is about. Also of relevance, several trucks owned by Urban Moving Systems had been sighted in various locations in the lead up to September 11 at significant locations to the September 11 attacks. Don't know exactly what they were, but police seem to think that they were significant locations. So based on all of this, they went and got a search warrant and searched the headquarters of Urban Moving Systems Company. They still couldn't find a video camera, but they did find 15 computers and a network server, which they thought was strange for a small moving company of 20 movers to have 15 computers. You think maybe you would need, one for the boss, one for the secretary, maybe one for someone who works in the office booking the jobs, but certainly 15 sounds like a lot. They also found several pseudo-names and aliases associated with Urban Moving Systems. So Urban Moving Systems was operating under various different names as a moving company. So all in all, pretty strange stuff. Based on information provided by the Miami police, 4 employees of another moving company, also Israelis, called Classic International Movers, were also detained. Now, Classic International Movers is even more interesting. They were believed by Miami police to have been utilized as a moving company by one of the 19 hijackers on the plane. All 4 detained employees were identified as Israeli nationals and recently entered the US from various locations in South America. So So they didn't come straight from Israel, they came via South America. One of the detainees was visibly disturbed by the agents questioning his personal email account. So whatever he had in there, he didn't want people to see, I suppose. Also, Classic International Movers, their telephone number also appeared in one of the phone books that we talked about earlier that was seized in the Dancing Israelis van. So Dancing Israelis had their phone number, and this company allegedly it doesn't say what, but did some sort of moving job for one of the hijackers. So whether that was moving explosives or we don't know. This is just a news article. Father of Mohammed Atta, one of the lead hijackers aboard the plane, wondered why US media outlets had chosen to ignore reports that US authorities seized a number of Israelis while they were dancing in celebration over the incident. He believed that, and keep in mind he's a member of Hamas, so perhaps a little biased, but he believed that US news organizations are largely controlled by Zionists. So he seems to think that Zionists or Israelis, Jews perhaps, own a number of media organizations in the US. Don't know why he said that. He is a Hamas member, so maybe these are things that, he has on his radar, he's interested in. So maybe he's right. Maybe you can leave a comment and let me know if that's true. Someone can have a look. Moving on. One of the Israelis apologized for appearing happy in the photographs. He stated that Israel had been dealing with terrorist incidents like this for years. He believes that the United States will now take steps to stop terrorism in the world. So does he think that because of this terrorist attack, Israel has something to gain? Does he think that Israel will now have US military aid? Does he think that the US will invade the Middle East and attack its enemies on Israel's behalf? Sort of sounds like it from what he's saying. He seems to think it's a good thing for Israel. During one of the searches of the Urban Moving Systems warehouse, they found that the owner had abandoned the company, left everything behind. Presumably he didn't want to talk to the authorities. Perhaps he had something to hide. Sounds like it. He was on the first plane, hot air balloon, swam back to Israel, whatever he did, but he was out of there, quick smart. Now this is interesting. I didn't know this before when I went through the files. I had to look this up. This is basically just administrative processes in the FBI. They have to have some easily quantifiable and easily transmitted goals or outcomes from their investigations. So they have, very shorthand for this, but this is just some goals that the FBI believe they had reached during this investigation. FIS stands for Foreign Intelligence Service. So they believed as a result of this investigation, the outcomes were that they had identified a foreign intelligence or terrorist technique occurring. They believed that they denied a foreign intelligence service or terrorist entry into the US. So maybe they blocked some other Israelis after they started looking into this. They believe that foreign intelligence service activity was observed or detected. They believe that they've identified foreign intelligence service front or cover organizations. So presumably that's Urban Moving Systems. They believe that it's a front for a foreign intelligence service, and in this case that would be Israel, so Mossad. And it also says they're positive intelligence. That just means they found something. They didn't find nothing. Negative intelligence means they didn't find anything, essentially. We've got another article here. It says some 60 Israelis who federal investigators have said are part of a long-running effort to spy on American government officials, among the hundreds of foreigners detained since September 11. There is no indication the Israelis were involved in the September 11 attacks, but investigators suspect that they may have gathered intelligence about the attacks in advance and not shared it. Now, did they have nothing to do with the attacks, or were they just not on board the planes? That doesn't mean, in my mind, from what they've said, that they didn't provide explosives or transport or something for these hijackers. It just means they weren't on the plane. Potentially. Maybe not. Investigators from numerous government agencies are part of a working group that has been compiling evidence in the case since the mid-90s. These documents detail hundreds of incidents, hundreds in cities and towns across the country that investigators say may well be an organised intelligence gathering activity. So presumably this has been happening for at least 5 or 6 years. Investigators are focusing part of their efforts on Israelis who said they are art students from the University of Jerusalem or Bezalel Academy, and repeatedly made contact with US government personnel by saying they wanted to sell cheap art or handiwork. Documents say that they targeted and penetrated military bases, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, dozens of government facilities, and even sent secret officers and even penetrated secret offices and unlisted private homes of law enforcement and intelligence personnel. That's really pushing it, isn't it? Supposed to be America's greatest ally, and they're showing up at the personal homes of law enforcement and military intelligence personnel. I mean, whatever they're up to, it's they're not being upfront about it. That's for sure. This says here that during the traffic stop, this is just an example. In 1997? No. In October 30, 2001. Wow, so 10 days before the attacks, there was a traffic stop at Mercer County Airport. An Israeli driving a 97 white Mitsubishi truck. It was stopped at the main terminal of the airport. The officer confronted the driver that he spoke to him, and the driver couldn't provide an explanation as to why he was inside the airport. The consent to search his vehicle yielded information that this man was employed by redacted information. So here's a guy going into an airport, snooping around, Israeli guy, just 10 days before the attacks. Had an Israeli passport and receipt showing that he'd paid a toll near the Federal Aviation Administration Center that same day. So on the same day, he was at an aviation administration center. He was making deliveries of framed artwork initially, which is violation of his visa. He's on a tourist visa. He's not supposed to be working. Result of this investigation is that, he was part of a Foreign Intelligence Service front organisation as well. This again says they believe there may have been foreknowledge of the attacks. Here's an article this is part of the 9/11 Commission report. So this was a report the government took on. A lot of people were critical of this report, that it had a lot of missing information in it, a lot of things they didn't even cover that they should have, and twisted things in a way that people didn't think was fair. But essentially it says here that they had some warnings prior to September 11, a number of warnings about terrorist attacks that could be in Saudi Arabia, Israel, Bahrain, Kuwait, Yemen, and possibly Rome. But the danger could be anywhere, including a possible attack on the G8 summit in Genoa. So I think the point here was that there was a lot of possible attacks and warnings and things going on at the time. And, that's their explanation for why things may have been missed, why police weren't actively investigating to the full potential that they could have every single report that came through, which is, I can understand that. This again, when the Israelis were questioned, he said he was going to stay with a mate, but he couldn't tell investigators where that friend was. He had plane tickets on him for the next day, booked for 12th of September at 5 o'clock to get the hell out of there, and he wanted to land in Greece. So he was, and then straight back to Israel. So he was gone. Day after, already had his plane tickets booked before the attacks, and he wanted out of there. So that, along with the explosives, along with everything else they found, the fact that they didn't have any moving equipment, the fact that they were filming the attacks, I mean, it's really starting to mount here. It's really, really not looking good for these guys. This says that one of the witnesses alleged that they had a video camera as well, which still haven't been able to find. This is just part of the report, the files that they released. The FBI, there's 134 pages that have been deleted there that they don't want to release, that are remaining classified, or they've been destroyed. I found this stuff numerous times throughout the 1,000 pages. I counted roughly probably double the amount of pages they released. They deleted or did not release for whatever reason, national security apparently. There's just a copy of one of the phone books. It's got Classic International's phone number in there. Those are the guys who did the moving job for one of the hijackers. This just says one of the guys is one of the dancing Israelis, broke down emotionally numerous times and cried. He wondered if he would ever see his family again and questioned interviewing agents when or if he would be released. Now, maybe some people do that. Maybe maybe that's common when people get arrested, that they break down, or maybe this guy knew that he did something seriously wrong and he was worried that he was going away potentially for a very long time. This is just something about the camera. It says the dates and the times were a little bit off. One of the witnesses said that the moving truck had no apparent dings, dents, or scratches on it, and was remarkably clean for a moving truck. This suggests that it probably wasn't being used for moving that much. Also, this guy just had a dig at the guy. He said he looked a bit lightweight, and he didn't look like he would work as a mover. So perhaps strong enough to lift a camera, but not strong enough to be moving furniture around. One of the Israelis also said, now that you see what they are capable of doing, the US will have to get involved now. So again, perhaps he's thinking that after this terrorist attack, the US will get involved militarily in the Middle East. So possibly good news for Israel. This is just going to the company a little bit. 20 or 30 men working for the moving company, primarily Polish, Russian, and a few Israelis. Perhaps the Polish and the Russians were Jewish guys. Said they found the jobs through newspapers, and he helped them get tourist visas. Because they were on tourist visas, the Israeli boss of the company was able to pay his fellow Israelis below minimum wage and pay them as cash to avoid paying taxes and benefits as well. He knew that they couldn't put up a fight because they were on a tourist visa, and that they did engage in some legitimate moving, it seems like. So they were doing some moving, perhaps just to keep the front up, I suppose. And he had some trucks and computers with internet access. They also had some ads that were available to them where they could call a company in Florida and have a driver's license issued to them same day with no hassles. No paperwork needed to provide who you are. Normally cost from $400 to $500 US, which is a fair bit of money in the US, and it sounds like these were counterfeit driver's licenses. So this is a picture of 100 Manhattan Avenue. This is the car park. I believe it's all I could find where the Israelis were allegedly filming the Twin Towers attacks from. I suppose that skyline there is where the Twin Towers used to be. That's 100 Manhattan Avenue. Now, in the beginning of summer, this is where it gets interesting. An old man in religious dress, seemed to be Muslim, gathered in the car park a few months prior to the attack multiple times. All of the men who were gathered there dressed like Muslims, and they all had long beards. The older man had salt and pepper coloured hair and wore white or purple clothes. on the occasions that this tenant saw him. She never saw him inside the building, only in the parking lot, so perhaps he wasn't even a resident. A few days ago, saw the same man leaving the building. The man was wearing purple clothing and was surrounded by a number of other men who were kissing him. I don't know if that's on the lips or on the cheek or on the hand or kissing his feet. Don't know what's going on there. Anyway, that was on the 14th of September. So this man was presumably a few days ago, around the time of September 11, again at this building, where they would have had a clear view of the Twin Towers. Now, in case you missed that, 100 Manhattan Avenue. Dancing Israelis were seen filming the attacks from those locations, and in the months leading up to the attacks, Muslim men kissing each other in Muslim clothes in the car park who didn't live there were also seen at the car park numerous times. This is going back to the owner of Urban Moving Systems. He was allegedly a crook. He would have delivery teams fill up the trucks with empty boxes because he could charge the customers more, saying they needed a bigger truck. And he would also have employees stand on the trucks when they were being weighed so that he could charge more. Their former employee further advised he was not surprised that the owner was arrested because he always spoke badly of the United States. So, real scumbag here. I mean, it's one thing to blow up the towers, but, you know, trying to charge customers an extra $50, $100 on their moving jobs, you know, not a nice guy. Notepad seized from one of the Israelis here. Investigation revealed the overseas telephone number was coincidentally subscribed to by an individual in South America with authentic ties to Islamic militants in the Middle East. Police raid Urban Moving Systems. This is just an article going into it. The owner, Dominic Suter, fled to Israel the next day. A few months later, Suter's name turned up on a list of terrorist suspects circulated by the FBI to European financial institutions. This article further goes on. These were no ordinary Israeli tourists, as they claimed when they were confronted. While all Israelis must serve some time in the military, an unusually high proportion of these students were deployed in elite units. The DEA report lists names, rank and serial number, blah, blah, blah. These guys, former Israeli military intelligence. One was a combat engineer, another a bomb disposal expert. The other was the son of a 2-star Israeli general. Others were intelligence officers, electronic intercept operators, special forces, and demolition/explosives ordnance experts. Sounds like the perfect team to plant a bunch of explosives and undertake a controlled demolition of a building. Now, these men had maps linking them to the blasts. So I guess the maps that they had some areas circled, maybe the Twin Towers, maybe the Pentagon, maybe some other areas where explosives were found. It looks like they knew what was going to happen, it says there. Then again, it goes on to say there were no evidence that the Israelis were involved in the 9/11 attacks. I don't know how they can say that, but investigators suspect that the Israelis may have gathered intelligence about the attacks in advance. I don't know. If they're found with explosives, that sounds like more than just having knowledge of the attacks. Anyway, when pressed further on this, FBI refused to elaborate, essentially. Someone else did go into a bit more detail. More than a third of these students claimed residence in Florida. At least 5 were intercepted in Hollywood and 2 in Fort Lauderdale. Hollywood in Florida, not the other one. 10 of the 19 terrorists of 9/11 were residing in Florida. Hollywood, a town of some 25,000 people north of Miami, was a major nexus of Israel spy network and the Muslim terrorist cells responsible for 9/11. 4 of the 5 members, were in Hollywood, Florida. Some other guys were in Pennsylvania. No, that was the crash, sorry. They lived in Delroy Beach, which is the north of Fort Lauderdale. Mossad was particularly interested in Muhammad Atta, the terrorist leader. He lived in Hollywood, Florida. German newspaper reports that Israeli agents were staying right near the post office where the terrorists had a mailbox. Essentially they had rented apartments very close to these terrorists. They posed as Israeli art students. Their addresses were very close to other Arabs in Texas, other areas. And it just questions down the bottom there. It said, why are we still arresting our alleged allies in relation to these attacks? Why are our allies involved in these attacks at all? Criminal ventures or possible Israeli passport exploitation by Arabic groups. So, potentially Arabic groups are using Israeli passports. That's what it sounds like there. So, not good, not good. This one was a little interesting. This went back to 1953. It basically, I won't read it all, but it essentially just details a Israeli or Zionist man who was arrested and detained and proved to have been spying on some of America's allies through an embassy. He planted a radio. He was a radio operator. He planted a radio in the guy's car and drove around and listened to his conversations, essentially. So it just goes into that a bit. So the reason they put that in there, I don't know why. I guess to show that Israel's been doing this since at least 1953, spying within the United States. Now we're back to talking about Dominic, the owner of Urban Moving Systems. One of his employees said that he would put a stack of numerous papers, one on top of the other, on top of a desk, and he would lift the papers one by one for the customer to sign. The customers would sign these papers without reading them. He didn't know what was in the papers, but he knew that essentially the point of all this was to overcharge these customers. So this guy's kind of a dick, to be honest. One of the Israelis that were arrested served as an F-16 fighter pilot mechanic. So presumably knew how to fly planes as well, which is kind of telling. He said that he wanted to work for Al Airlines, which is the Israel national airline, I believe. But he hadn't quite passed the test. So anyway, the point of that is he knew how to fly planes, essentially, and to a very high level. Another Israeli art student here was found asking directions to a nuclear power plant in Florida on September 17th. On October 16th, another individual was detained for parking on a bridge at midnight and taking pictures of a rubbish processing facility. So they seem to have an interest in any of these big kind of plants and things like that that could, possibly be targeted for terrorist attacks, whether they're planning on attacking these buildings themselves or they're just tailing terrorists who are planning to do the same, I guess. There's also some other people, apart from the art students. Guys were seen in malls all over the country selling toy helicopters, and they were believed to be a front as well. A few of them were picked up and questioned by police post-September 11, and after they were picked up, these kiosks were everywhere. There was hundreds of them all across the United States. After these guys were picked up, within a 2-hour period, sometime in the next week or two, all of the kiosks were abandoned simultaneously and left empty. So hundreds of Israelis just fled. So I mean, it doesn't sound like they were just selling toy helicopters. One of the Israelis picked up advised that the Israeli criminal community is very good and are among the worst criminals. He stated the Israeli and Arab criminal communities work together, dealing primarily in weapons and drugs. He advised that Israelis will run drugs and arms through Israel for the Arab countries. There are Israelis who support Arab terrorism through their criminal activity. Terrorists and individuals funding terrorist activities. He also advised that Israel is the world's largest exporter of ecstasy. So, I mean, they're supporting Arab terrorists. I wouldn't have suspected that. I thought they were all fighting against them. Shortly after the September 11 attack, someone called and wanted to inform the FBI that he'd been taking private flying lessons at Jet Center at the airport in northeast Philadelphia. The instructor was Egyptian and had been in the United States for several years. He hadn't been home to Egypt at all in the 7 years. However, in the past 12 months, he'd flown home to Egypt 5 times. He didn't know if this was anything significant, but he felt he needed to report this information to the FBI. Israeli art students, a bit more information here. They were very close to the Al-Qaeda terrorists and their supporters. Addresses in Hollywood, Florida, Miami, Florida, Irving, Texas, living in the same neighborhoods. We spoke about this before. The real mission of the Israelis was not to sell art at federal facilities, but to spy on the Al-Qaeda members. According to FBI sources, Urban Moving Systems and the activities of its employees on 9/11 did not sit too well. One member of the FBI's Task Force Special Agent Michael Dix, he pursued the Israeli angle but soon found himself transferred to Pakistan to help rescue Wall Street Journal reporter Daniel Pearl, who had been kidnapped by Al-Qaeda. There was one catch, however. The FBI was already aware that Pearl had been brutally murdered by his captors. Sounds like they were trying to get rid of this investigator who was investigating Israel. Urban Moving Systems, allegedly a bomb-making and anthrax storage warehouse. So they believe that Urban Moving Systems was used, the warehouse at least anyway, was used to make bombs and store anthrax. Now, there was an anthrax attack 1 week after September 11, and from memory, I think about 20 or 30 people died. So it was a legitimate, serious terrorist attack. This here says there were some emergency calls to 911 made on 9/11. For some reason, after 9/11, the computer systems got changed and all the emergency calls registered on September 11 were scrubbed from the archives. Archives dating back to 1989, including those dealing with the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center, were similarly affected. So they lost all the data on the 2 attacks on the World Trade Centers. Now, if you're still listening, congratulations. This is where it gets even crazier. Urban Moving Systems was searched by the FBI. Upon searching the warehouse, they discovered fertilizer and other chemicals for making explosives, pipes, caps, and traces of anthrax. After anthrax was discovered, investigators wearing hazardous material suits went through the warehouse. Residents in the local area reported that helicopters with infrared radar swooped in over the warehouse on several occasions. The van driver was pulled over, said, "We are Israeli, we are not your problem. Your problems are our problems. The Palestinians are the problem." Well, I think making explosives and anthrax is probably also a problem. I can't think of any good uses for that. One of the photos also showed one of the dancing Israelis holding a cigarette lighter lit in front of the towers in a celebratory manner with the burning buildings in the background. So certainly a happy chappy there. This just says other FBI agents who were questioned, involved in the case in the dancing Israelis have all been transferred. It sounds like the FBI didn't want to go into this. They were calling these dancing Israelis false flag teams. I don't know who was doing that, but that seems to suggest they think the Twin Towers attacks might have been an Israeli false flag. Israelis were also stopped, where's the date on this, on a bridge in New Jersey after the September 11 attacks. Police suspected the perpetrators were trying to blow up the bridge. The van was full of explosives. Some of the dancing Israelis were also spotted at a video rental store with Mohammed Atta, the head of the hijackers, and 3 of the other hijackers in Jersey City. I guess this was before the attacks. They were renting a documentary on the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center. I mean, how many more hints do you need? How are these guys free? How were they not arrested? They were with the hijackers. This is insane. Renting a video of the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center. This was confirmed by the video store owner who went through their rental history. They also purchased phone cards from the video store for calling back to Dubai. Someone here, Timothy McVeigh, was arrested after the bombing of a federal building in Oklahoma City in 1995. I don't know what that was about. After 2.5 months in prison and after a barrage of official complaints from the Israeli government, the 5 Israeli movers, these are the dancing Israelis, were released over the objections of the CIA and permitted to turn home. Goes back into some other things. One of the lawyers said that his client once worked for Israeli intelligence in another country, maybe Israel. They also sued the US District Court for wrongful arrest and imprisonment. How are you going to sue the US after you've been found with explosives in your van? I mean, do these people really love suing that much? That's insane. Also asked, when asked how the 9/11 attacks would affect US-Israeli relations, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, said, "It's very good." Well, not good, but it'll generate immediate sympathy for Israel from Americans. So they seem to think it's a good thing these attacks happened. And the Israelis who were celebrating seem to think it's a good thing as well. They all seem to be in agreement that it's very, very good for Israel, these attacks. This is going back to the Israelis using a rental mailbox in a shopping centre just 1 block away from one of the Arab hijackers' apartments. If the Israelis were stalking the hijackers, they would have also likely known about their interest in the World Trade Center. Presumably they would have visited or something, I suppose. Someone who worked at the Trade Center for 20 years revealed that he spotted one of the hijackers, Mohammed al-Shahi, one of the terrorist hijackers of United Flight 1575, 2.5 months before September 11. Casing the North Tower of the World Trade Center. His comments were part of a press conference organised by family members of the 9/11 victims. Presumably, they were not happy with the official reports and they wanted to get to the bottom of it. And they wanted to know from both Clinton and Bush administrations what happened. Rodriguez was a building manager, held the master key for the North Tower. He was the last survivor pulled by rescue workers from the rubble of the building after it collapsed. Rodriguez said that Mohammed asked him how many public bathrooms were in the building. In retrospect, Rodriguez believed the terrorist was looking for ways to place additional explosives in the building prior to the aeroplane attack. Rodriguez also said as he was climbing the stairs to help rescue people after American Airlines Flight 11 struck his building, he heard heavy equipment being moved around on the 34th floor, which was closed and locked for renovation. In the chaos, Rodriguez did not have time to investigate. He believed there might have been additional explosives placed inside the building. Rodriguez also claimed that while assisting evacuees, he heard non-aircraft related explosions from floors below his location on the 33rd floor. Now, the attacks happened on the top floors around 80 or 90, so to hear explosions below the 33rd floor it couldn't have been a plane. Someone believed the Bush administration story about the World Trade Center collapse was bogus. Criminal Justice Center guy who worked there, Reynolds, opined that if demolition destroyed 3 steel skyscrapers, the Twin Towers and Building 7 at the World Trade Center on 9/11, then a case for an inside job and a government attack on America would be compelling. Reynolds added the government's collapse theory is highly vulnerable on its own terms. Only professional demolition appears to account for the full range of facts associated with the collapse of the 3 buildings. Moreover, Rodriguez passed along several of his tips about pre-9/11 surveillance of the World Trade Center. Rodriguez believed the terrorist was looking for ways to place additional explosives in the building prior to the airplane attack. Also said he was climbing the stairs to help rescue people when he heard heavy equipment being moved around. Yeah, we've already been over that. The Israeli art students, someone believes they were providing operational decoys and even material support to the hijackers. This theory arose when several Israeli art students in Canada were arrested for selling bogus Chinese art that they passed off as Israeli. Israeli art students were believed to be funneling proceeds from the art sales to Islamist radical groups. If the Florida and Texas Israeli art rings discovered prior to 9/11 were providing such financial support to the hijackers, it would explain why they closely located their mail drops so close to one another. The planes careened into the Twin Towers. Alex Odigo's vice president for sales and marketing confirmed that Odigo employees in New York and Israel received a warning 2 hours before the attack. The warning appeared to be anonymous, but Odigo programmers recorded the IP address of the message's sender. Odigo also notified Mossad and the FBI, but the FBI failed to take action and notify occupants of the World Trade Center. Now, if the FBI thinks that the Israelis did have something to do with the attack, and the US, as an extension of the FBI, maybe they covered it up because they don't want to expose their incompetence that let these attacks happen. Maybe the US wasn't involved in blowing up the towers, but, seems like the cover-up on their end may have been incompetence or perceived incompetence by the public. And, maybe that's why they stopped some of these investigators looking into the Israel angle, because it showed, the failings of the US system. Now, by September 3rd, 2001, so 8 days before the attacks, Zion American Israeli Shipping Company completed its move from the World Trade Center. After cancelling its lease in April 2001 and forfeiting a $50,000 lease cancellation policy, World Trade Center and Port Authority Police had previously determined that Zim's World Trade Center office was an intelligence operation that involved Mossad and CIA agents. Ooh, we got a CIA link here. Unlike other tenants in the World Trade Center, Zim's stairwell access door was covered by security cameras. The major media largely failed to report the story of Israeli intelligence teams masquerading as art students. Only Fox News referred to it in a 4-part investigative series in December 2001, but it soon removed it from its own website. Reporter Carl Cameron stated there is no indication that the Israelis were involved in the September 11 attacks, but investigators suspect that the Israelis may have gathered intelligence about the attacks in advance, something we've now heard from multiple people multiple times. This is a report from one of the planes that was downed. Basically says that one of the hijackers shot and killed a passenger. The passenger shot was reported to be of a man named Daniel C. Lewin, an Israeli-American agent with top secret Israel anti-terrorist unit of the counter-terrorism Sayeret Matkal branch of the Israeli Defense Force. So we've got an Israel anti-terrorist unit military officer on board the plane when it went down, when it crashed into the building. So, was he helping with the attacks? Was he tailing the suspect? Was he unwittingly helping with the attacks? Did they put him on board telling him he was just going to follow them, but really, Mossad knew that this plane was going to go down and they just sacrificed this man? Lewin, the guy who was shot, also served as the chief technology officer of a company called Akamai Technologies, a software company based in Massachusetts. 9/11 Commission report stated that Lewin was stabbed and not shot. So either he was stabbed or shot, or, maybe neither and he just died in the plane crash. But, either way, he didn't make it. Lewin and Israel were praised in the report. No mention was made of Sweeney's last words to her superiors. So there was another lady on board who reported it to her superiors, maybe an Israeli lady. Additional reports of suspicious Middle Easterners, in addition to a report from San Francisco about suspicious activity by 2 individuals whose van was traced to a jewelry store. Now, in these reports, for diplomatic reasons, they seem to use the description Middle Easterners in place of Israelis to not upset the Israelis, I suppose. Suspicious photographing of videotaping of high-rise buildings, including the Main Street Bridge and the Skyway. Off-duty police officer reported seeing one of the 3 people who he described as Middle Eastern in appearance, photographing and videotaping high-rise buildings. So this is in, I don't know if this happened before or after the attacks. The report was made in 2004. Investigation is ongoing. Again, 2 individuals in a blue van taking pictures of the Bay Bridge and surrounding areas in front of the main gate in San Francisco. License plates were traced to a jewelry store, presumably owned by some Israelis. Rental agreement had expired 2 days earlier in New Mexico, and they were way off track from the Austin to Chicago route. These are some other movers. Israelis then changed their story. They claimed they were dropping off furniture in New Mexico, but they could not provide a delivery address in the town. Also, their rental agreement was only for interstate use in Illinois. Inside the truck, Chief Green found junk furniture, not worth moving anywhere, and 50 boxes that Israelis claimed were a private delivery. The Israelis were turned over to INS. Nothing more was heard about them or their cargo. Suspicious behaviour of all these different Israeli-owned moving companies all over the country, apparently. The owner of one of the companies, Zion Rocker, after being questioned by police and hassled by police, claimed that the police was xenophobic and racist. Maybe they were. Maybe they were just investigating the explosives and dodgy moving companies. Who knows? Found traces. Okay, so this is another incident again. May 7, 2002, after the attacks. Police and naval law enforcement investigators found traces of TNT and plastic explosives in a rental truck driven by Israelis after they were stopped for speeding. One of the Israelis had an expired visa and an international driver's license and no identification. They claimed they had delivered furniture in some area. This is maybe the same incident or another incident. While chasing the Israelis, Harris noted a police officer noted they threw a vial out of the truck. The Israelis later denied they threw anything out of the truck. The ejected container was reported to have contained a suspicious fuel source that was sent to Tennessee Emergency Management Office in Tennessee. It was later discovered to have contained a mixture of a cleaning fluid called astromid 18, gluconic acid, and water. Harris said he was not sure why the substances were mixed together. The Israelis also had a learn to fly brochure in their truck. The investigator said he got a sick feeling when he saw the brochure and business card of a Florida-based flight instructor named Nissan Gayet, another Israeli citizen. Police feared the Israelis might have been targeting nuclear fuel services plant in nearby Tennessee. A lawyer for the Israelis later claimed they meant no harm. He only had a fake ID so he could get into a nightclub. They never gave his age though. The government said that the Israelis no longer posed any danger, but the state of Tennessee kept the case open. On October 10, 2001, so September, October, 1 month after the September 11 attacks, two Israelis, one a former Israeli army colonel and the other a Mossad intelligence agent, were arrested inside the Mexican Congress with 9mm pistols and dynamite. According to the Mexican Justice Department, the head of security, Salvador or something, verified the Israelis had in their possession 9 hand grenades, sticks of dynamite, detonators, wiring, and 2 9mm Glock automatics. The Israelis were subsequently released after the intervention of the Israeli embassy in Mexico City. How does the Israeli embassy have so much sway? I know those guys had TNT and explosives and detonators on them in the courthouse or in the Mexican parliament, in Mexican Congress, but, let them go. Don't know how they got away with that. This is going back to 1990. Head of Colombia's secret police, General Miguel Marquez, blamed Israeli paramilitary training for a wave of terrorist attacks in Colombia during the entire year. These included the bombing of an Avianca passenger jet in November 1989 that killed 117 people, assassinations of local political leaders, and 2 attempts on his own life. A bombing of Maz's police headquarters killed 63 people. Colombia responded to the Israeli involvement with terrorists by abrogating a 1962 no-visa travel agreement with Israel, presumably not letting any more Israelis into the country. In April 2004, New Zealand's foreign minister called Israel's ambassador to complain that 2 suspected Mossad agents were arrested at Auckland Airport after trying to obtain false New Zealand passports. Now, here's some Israeli incidents I found through ChatGPT. I just asked if there were any incidents they were possibly involved in or alleged to have been involved in. Something called Operation Entebbe in 1976. An Air France flight was hijacked by Palestinian and German terrorists. Israel launched a highly publicized military rescue operation, freeing most of the hostages. Some conspiracy theories with no credible evidence, allegedly, claim that Israeli intelligence may have had foreknowledge or involvement in the setup to justify a military action. Sound familiar? 1954, the Lavon affair. These are false flag bombings in Egypt. Not an airline bombing, but Israeli agents planted bombs in US and British-linked institutions in Egypt in a failed false flag operation meant to destabilize Nasser's regime. Though it's not aviation related, it is often cited as precedent for Israel conducting covert or false flag actions abroad. So they have before, basically, is what it's saying, and it's confirmed. Al Security Operations Abroad, that's Israel's national airline, is known for extensive Mossad-linked security and surveillance operations, including monitoring passengers and embedding intelligence operatives on international flights. While not accused of hijacking or bombing, this level of state-linked surveillance has raised privacy and sovereignty concerns in other countries. Business ties between the Bush and bin Laden family. This might be a topic, well, it's definitely going to be a topic for another video. It's documented that members of the Bush family had business associations with the bin Laden family, a wealthy and prominent family in Saudi Arabia. For instance, Salam bin Laden, Osama bin Laden's half-brother, invested in Arbusto Energy, a company founded by George W. Bush. Additionally, both families had connections to the Carlyle Group, a global investment firm with interest in defense contracting. Notably, on September 10, 2001, one day before the September 11 attacks, former President George H.W. Bush attended a Carlyle Group conference that also included Shafiq bin Laden, another half-brother of Osama bin Laden. These associations have been highlighted in various media, including Michael Moore's documentary Fahrenheit 9/11, to suggest potential conflicts of interest or undue influence. I mean, George Bush meeting up with bin Laden's family the day before the September 11 attacks. I mean, that's a massive coincidence. Something just to finish on here. Thanks for your time today, guys. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did reading it all. Hope I saved you some time. You don't have to go through 1,000 FBI files, which I know you were planning on doing at some stage. I have the time to do it because apparently I'm a loser who can do this sort of stuff, investigate 20-year-old cases. Anyway, I found it really interesting. I hope you did too. Thanks for sticking around. I'll leave you with this. The motto of the Mossad intelligence agency is noteworthy when pointing to its foreign operations. By way of deception, thou shalt do war. So apparently that's a motto of theirs, something they live by, and I think it speaks pretty well to everything we've covered today. I don't know what you think. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe as always. Consider making a donation. Even $2 will help me buy books and spend the time to go through these. There's a link to my Patreon in the description below. If you want to know anything else, if you have suggestions for other topics, if there's anything I missed, any information you want me to know, leave a comment, and thanks for your time.